Today I'm going to be answering the question of, do you need to actually hire a healthy home consultant or a consultant on your new build if you already have an architect and you already have a builder? But first, I'm Christine, licensed general contractor here in Southern California and consultant on new build projects nationwide. So I'm going to be really straightforward with you today if you actually might really benefit from hiring a consultant, or if you and your team are really dialed in and you might not need additional support. I want to first start with building your team. That's really where you should start. If you are doing an extensive renovation, you already have the land, you already have the structure. But if you're doing a new build project, the first place you need to start is finding the land. After you have the land and you've done your due diligence, that's soils testing, you might have percolation testing if you're going to be having septic on site, you might be doing some testing to determine groundwater. There's a lot that goes into finding the right land, but immediately after that is when you start assembling your design and your build team. So this is going to include an architect and a builder. So those are bare minimum requirements, having an architect and having a builder for your new build or if you're doing an extensive renovation. So let's talk about what an architect and a builder should actually be doing on your project. First is the architect. What is the architect's role for your project? Most people assume they're there to make things aesthetically pleasing and to submit all of your plans to the building department so then you can actually get a permit to build. That's just some of it. What your architect should actually be doing is far more in depth than just the aesthetic part and pulling a permit. Your architect should actually be taking the wheel of the project requirements. And what I mean by this is, yes, there's floor plan and space planning, but they're also doing exterior elevations and they're also going to be getting into the architectural details. And those details dictate over to your builder the means and the methods of how something should be constructed. So most of your architectural process will be broken out into phases. So your first phase is a schematic design. This is where things are sometimes hand sketched. It's like very loose. This is just a schematic, conceptual layout and maybe what the exterior might look like. But the schematic design is when things are still moving around quite a bit. Then you move into a design development stage. This is where the design continues to develop and things are then put into computerized programs and you can start to see the two-dimensional shape of what the floor plan and the exterior is going to look like. And this is where a lot of things get left out completely. The design development is where you want to start to infuse your expectations, because I often say if it's not on your plans, it's not going to get built. And so the typical architectural process goes through the schematic design, the design development, and then it gets into construction documents. These three stages make up your construction documents. And then it gets sent over to the building department for permitting and it gets sent out to builders. The problem that often happens, and this is a good question to be asking your architect, the problem that so often happens is that this construction document set or everything that your architect has been working on has a fairly low level of detail. Building permit requirements have a low level of detail requirements. It doesn't take a very robust set of plans to pull a building permit. The problem lies in that if those architectural plans that are given to your builder do not reflect what your expectations are, there's a big gap there. There's a lot of information missing. And then two things happen if you are following this more conventional way of architectural process. What happens is, one, you don't have all of the information that's in your brain of what you would like in your healthy home. All of that information is not memorialized into a set of plans. And so it lives in your brain and there's a lot of miscommunication and things aren't getting done or the materials aren't being used that you really ultimately are expecting. And so when there's a low level of detail in your plans that are given to your builder, there's miscommunication. But the second thing that happens is pricing for your project is wildly inaccurate. That's simply just because there's not enough information on the plans. Okay, so how do we fix this architectural piece? The architectural plans should be the driver for the project expectations. And this happens very regularly on commercial projects. The architectural plans are so robust, they even have requirements around specifications of material and quality control testing. That's very common in commercial, not nearly as common when building a residential home. So the resolve for this architectural process is to actually make sure that your expectations are documented, either on the plans or on what's referred to as a specification document. This is something that we do heavily when we're consulting on a project during the planning stage, is we go through every bit of the home from the exterior, the foundation, the exterior walls, what's happening with the roof and attic line. Then we move into insulation and drywall. We talk about mechanical, electrical, plumbing, flooring, like every bit of decision making goes through the conversation of good, better, best. And then a decision is made, and that decision is incorporated into the architectural plans, and then it lives there. So then when those architectural plans do go over to the contractor, it's very clear what insulation is expected, what type of flooring is expected, what type of waterproofing is expected. All of those decisions have been made. So your contractor has now clear information, and they know how to actually bid out and give you accurate pricing. So that's how we can really clean up the architectural process. Now, you might not need a consultant if your architect is handling all of that. If they are doing plans, specifications, material selections, and quality control within your construction documents, you may be in a really good position with your architect already. One other thing to add to the architectural process, and this is often something that you'll see as an added option in the scope that your architect gives you, but this is something that's really important. Ask your architect, or maybe it's already been given to you as a proposal, but ask your architect if they will be doing something called project admin. This is project administration, or sometimes construction administration. This is when your architect will be overseeing the project for a period of time. They'll show up to the job site, typically prior to the foundation being poured. They'll be at the job site looking at the exterior as it's being built and when windows are installed. They're offering some observations and oversight to the project. So that's a really good added piece if they offer that service. So that's how you can get dialed in on the architectural side. Now, let's talk about what happens on the construction side. The build side, the conventional idea of thinking of what the builder does is they're just there to build. They're there to implement. They're there to use their subcontractors that they have relationships with, and they're there to oversee the project. They are the ones that are in control of the construction schedule. All things very true. But what you want your builder to really be doing is implementing exactly what's on the architectural plans. And throughout construction, there's something that happens quite a bit. The builder has questions. There's questions around window details. They might have questions about something that's happening in the foundation, or if there's going to be a kitchen island sink, do they need plumbing? There's 1,000 questions that come up. Your contractor should be submitting those questions to the architect for clarification. This is referred to as an RFI process, a request for information. And this should all be well documented so that, again, when the contractor has questions, it's documented and the architect is typically responding to those questions. That is the most streamlined way for a project to run, is your architectural plans have all of the information, material selections, your expectations. It is sent over to the builder to accurately price your project. And then throughout the build, if the contractor does have questions, they are submitting RFIs, requests for information, to your architect. And that's it. What we don't want the builder doing, ideally, is radically strategizing during the build. And this is what happens in a conventional builder situation. Is, again, if you go back to the conventional architectural process that has a low level of detail, just enough to pull a building permit, and then it goes over to the contractor with just enough information, there's not accurate information on material selections. There's not enough detail on actual details, roof, attic, window flashing, foundation, how things are going to be watertight and airtight. There's not enough information. And so when there's not enough information, they strategize and come up with maybe what they did on the previous project or what they've always been doing. But when it's not in your architectural plans, there's no way for you to know if that's what you are actually wanting to have happen. There's no documentation that says, yes, I approve that type of insulation. And so that's where it becomes this gray area with the contractor. And that's where things so often happen with, my contractor did this, it's not what I expected, what can I do now? Or the most common one that I see is, I'm standing in the middle of my home as it's being framed and my contractor is telling me that spray foam insulation is going to start happening next week and I don't want spray foam in my home, so what can I do? That's a very big problem and not one that's easy to resolve mid-construction. And the way that that issue comes to be is, again, the architectural plans do not reflect expectations. If the architectural plans have spray foam insulation and they get permitted and then your contractor bids it out and now they're framing it and building it, that's what the project expectations were set as. So the whole point in the build process should be for the contractor to purely implement. That is what they're there to do. Implement the construction documents, manage the schedule, and manage the subcontractors. That makes for a very streamlined process. So you may not need a consultant on your project if the contractor has a good understanding of building science and building a healthy home and understanding how control layers work, meaning how things are watertight and airtight. They have a really good understanding of those things, and they are given a very robust set of architectural plans that align with what your project goals are. That together may make for a really great solid team, and your project could very easily be streamlined in that fashion. If you wanted to have a starting place, if you feel like, I really want that, I wish I had a great architect, a great builder, a great place to start is our directory. So there's a link below, the Holistic Homes Directory. It's a national directory of architects and builders that are doing things great. And they're really trying to move the needle in building better, robust, high performance, healthy homes. But there's not enough of them. There's not enough of these builders everywhere. And so if you do find yourself that you do want support or you do want consulting in your project, or it feels like there's a big weight on your shoulder making these decisions, then there's a link below where you can apply for consulting. We do new build consulting nationwide. We have a great team that supports the entire project. We can even help vet architects and builders and help you build a really great team. So if that's something you're looking for, click the link below, apply for consulting. I would love to learn more about your project. I hope this episode was helpful. And if you found it valuable, click the link below to subscribe and get more episodes just like this every week.